No, I haven't been very vocal on my social medias as of the last couple months, but I'm here today to talk about something that's been getting a lot of attention in the last couple of weeks, and that's the murder of George Floyd. Um, because I think it's important that everybody uses whatever platform that they have to speak out on it and raise awareness to the topics surrounding it. I'm going to start off with talking about my own personal experience, and then I'm going to be talking about more of the American side of it, and then how it relates to all of us in Australia here, and then things that you can do to help. Because I am part of Generation Z, my life is pretty much the same amount online as is offline. There isn't that much separation with my friends that I might connect with online, especially even now in this time, how in quarantine you weren't allowed to see anybody, so everything was done via the internet. With that being said, it has opened the door to a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. One is that I can be more informed on everything, and I can meet people and talk to people and listen to people who I probably never would have without the internet. A downside is that anybody can have an opinion on you, whether you like it or not. So I was privileged enough when I was growing up, when I was little, that I didn't see racism really that much, which I'm very thankful for. Like, there was off comments here and there, but most stuff you could just overlook. However, as I got older, I started to notice more things. Maybe that's just something that comes with age. You become more observant of things that are going on around you. And so as I got older, I started to notice more things. A lot of problems caused with things, be it my gender, my race, anything, really. Whether it was racial stereotypes or racial slurs. At this point, pretty much heard anything and everything anyone could throw at me. And not gonna lie, it hurt a lot. However, just from how I have been conditioned, I just never wanted to speak up about it, because race and talking about race and racial issues, I think, makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But uncomfortableness shouldn't mean that you don't talk about things that are happening, and sweeping it under the rug just leads to it getting worse and worse, and it just bursting out, as we have seen with all of these protests. I think a large reason why I don't like talking about it myself is because I don't want to be seen as like the angry black girl, the angry loud girl, that stereotype that is put so much out there with such a negative connotation. But I don't think that it should be. I think if something is upsetting me, I should be able to talk about it. With that being said, there's a lot of things that I think are unfair in my own personal experience to do with race, from like my representation in the media and things like never being able to see anybody that looked like me in media, in TV shows and movies. Or when I was growing up, there was never a black character ever, and if there was, they were the token black character. And any movies that really had any good representation of people that looked like me were about slavery. And that's, I think, why everyone gets so excited when a movie like Black Panther comes out, because you're like, wow, a movie, and it isn't just about the bad side of being black, because although there is a lot of negatives that come with it, it is inherently beautiful culture. And like, there's been a lot of other things other than not wanting to speak up about things. It's how long it took me to finally accept myself for who I was, and not trying to suppress my culture, suppress who I am, or whitewashing myself. That being said, when I turn on the news, on my social media timeline, and I see another hashtag for another life that was killed, another black life that was killed, it really does upset me. It fills me with a lot of emotion, a lot of fear, a lot of anger and frustration, because I'm like, it is 2020. Why are we still dealing with this? And a lot of it comes with the fact that it's so easy for me to place myself in their shoes because all of their photos look like my family photos. All of their stories, I'm like, that could so easily be me or one of my family members if I was over there, and that makes me upset because I'm like, what did we do? It isn't fair that a skin color is weaponized and seen as a threat when it is not. And I don't understand how just because you have a badge you can get away with it. But even worse than seeing all of those names in the news is seeing them all go away and see nothing be done, no justice be served. People slowly forget and want to move on because this is something that you can move on from. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Stephen Watts, Trayvon Martin. There is literally so many names. I could go on for hours naming all of the black people who have been killed by police unlawfully. I just want you to imagine forgetting about race. Your family member, your brother, your sister, your father, your mother, your cousin, your aunt, your uncle was just killed by a police officer, and that police officer got away with it. Because that is the conversation that we're having right now, is the systematic racism and oppression that is happening over there. And people like to pull out numbers such as, well, there's been more white people killed by police, and there should be because they are the majority in America. I think what you're not understanding is that black people are a minority. They make up 12% of the US population, and yet they make up 30% of the prison population. On an average, 1 in every 1,000 black men and boys will die at the hands of a police officer, and 1 in every 100,000 white men will. Do you not understand? It shouldn't be that way, and I don't understand why why human rights, why black lives are a political opinion. It is a human right. It's not something that should be discussed. This is another human life that was taken. He had a daughter who was never going to be able to talk to him again. He has siblings. He has a family. He has friends that are never going to be able to talk to him again. And so do every single one of those black Americans who were killed. Trayvon Martin was killed in 2014. He was born in 2002, which is a year younger than me. He would have been 18 this month. He should have been complaining about having his graduation cancelled due to COVID-19. He should have gone to prom. He should have done so many more things in his life, but he couldn't because a police officer, decided that him holding Skittles in an Arizona iced tea was a threat. Nobody's first instinct should be to shoot, especially not those who are sworn to protect. And the conversation that is largely being had is of police brutality. And if you're not seeing that it is a corrupt system, then I encourage you to open your eyes. Because countless police officers are getting away with murder by hiding behind a badge. Yes, it's fine that George Floyd's murderers were fired after everyone got outraged on Twitter over the video. But it shouldn't take someone getting filmed for their life to matter. George Floyd's original ruling of death was due to pre-existing medical conditions. And if no one was filming, they probably all would have gotten away with it. The most you should fear when interacting with police authorities is a ticket, a fine, getting actually arrested and just being in jail and being able to be let out on bail or because somebody came to get you. It should not be death. And you're expecting these people not to get angry when they see how people are treated. A white boy will go in and shoot a school and get escorted out after he's killed numerous people. A serial killer is seen as less of a danger and just mentally ill, and yet a black man is shot without a care in the world. When you work in something to do with customer service, whether it be retail or fast food or receptionist, you are held to a standard where you need to keep your cool and de-escalate situations that you're put in. You're not allowed to go yelling at the customer, you're not allowed to punch the customer, push the customer, escalate it any more than you need. You're not allowed to do that or you'll be fired. And yet I've heard so many stories on the news of police officers get demoted to desk duty. And beyond just the policing system, the legal system in general, the justice system, is completely corrupt as well. The fact that a black person is more likely to serve a sentence that is 10% longer than a white person for the exact same crime. It's the fact that so many black people are incarcerated unlawfully for a crime that they did not commit. And this can just even be seen because although black people make up the higher population of convictions in prison, they also make up the largest amount of wrongly convicted people who are released after they get attention, after they get a good lawyer that pleads their case and reopens it, if their family members have enough money to do that for them. Basically what I'm trying to say is that it's not hard for you to see the racial inequality and injustices exist. You need to do the bare minimum research. But above all of that, you need to listen to people's stories. It's about little black boys and girls in America getting taught by their parents how to act when you get pulled over by the police to make you seem like you're not a threat, to keep your hands visible at all times, to announce all movements, to always comply. If you're getting pulled over for a busted taillight, it shouldn't end in death. A whole group of people shouldn't fear for their lives because of a system so corrupt. And even now, with the protests over there, although the media tries to paint it out as all of them, instead of being protests, just being riots, there have been countless videos on the internet of just these protests going through, peaceful protests, people just yelling out chants, singing songs. And you don't need to go far on the internet, just go on to Twitter or any sort of social media that isn't being funneled by the media to see how many of these protests have been turned into riots because of police throwing tear gas at their own citizens, beating them with batons when they are dispersing, when they are told to walk home and then just getting followed and beat up. It is not right. These are the people that are meant to serve and protect. And I don't understand when they're protesting for police brutality, how they are met with police brutality, and yet the KKK has had many protests and they are protected. And the Black Lives Matter was not started to say that Black lives matter more than any other race. It is saying that Black lives in this society do not matter as much as other lives. What part of all lives matter won't matter until Black lives do you not understand? During the Australian bushfires, when so many people lost their houses to the fire, so many people lost their homes, their businesses, everything due to these fires. If my house, which was never in any danger, if I was demanding that the firefighters come to protect my house, you guys would say I am being selfish, which it would be. Because my house isn't in danger, my house isn't the one. Yes, it would matter if my house is on fire, but it wasn't. If after all of those fires came and the government was giving out money in stimulus packages, if I was demanding that I get paid because I was affected by the smoke, that would be unfair because I'm not the one who has lost everything. I'm not the one that needs to rebuild their life. If I was doing an exam during this time, if I was doing an exam over the bushfires and I asked for special consideration, it wouldn't make sense because my life isn't the one that's being directly impacted by these fires. Yes, every Australian life matters. Yes, every Australian business matters. Yes, every Australian matters. But you're not the focus here. You're not the one being affected. You're not the one being hurt. Saying stuff like all life matters is simply taking attention away from those who really need it right now. Another easy way to describe another hard topic that people seem hard to grasp is white privilege. When someone says you have white privilege, they're not saying that you don't have problems, you don't have issues in your life. They are saying that they are not based off your race. Literally every single person that is watching this right now has some form of privilege. Whether it be due to your race, your gender, your socioeconomic status, where you were born, who your parents are, what education your parents got, which area of town you live in, you have some form of privilege. Me, for example, because I still live at home in my parents' house, I don't have to worry about trying to make rent every single week or month. I don't have to worry if I'm suddenly unemployed. For me, I can put my education above my work right now because it is not my priority. I have that ability. I know that at the end of the day, I will still have a roof over my head and food in the pantry because that is not my priority right now. However, there's a lot of people out there that do have to worry. They have to put their studies aside because they need to make rent that week. And for that, I'm privileged. Just because you have privilege doesn't mean you don't have problems. It means that those problems aren't due to whatever your privilege is. And so it is everybody's responsibility to use whatever privilege they have to help out others. With all of that being said, Black Lives Matter and police brutality is not an American-only issue. There is issues all over the world, especially here in Australia. I'm sure by now all of you have heard on the news about the over 400 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who have died in police custody since the 1990s. And the fact is we can't even count all of the ones before that because documents were probably ripped up and tampered with. When our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, said he didn't want us importing issues from overseas to Australia, I think he failed to realise that those issues were imported when colonisers came here. I think he failed to recognise that all of these issues have been happening since the Aboriginal people's genocide. Apart from the fact that Australia is behind in literally almost everything, it took until 1967 for the referendum to change the Australian Constitution so that they could include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in laws made by the government. It took until 1969 for all of the states in Australia to abolish stealing children from their families and replacing them in white homes. It took until 2008 for the Australian government to say sorry, let alone do anything. And the fact that our Prime Minister hasn't even mentioned the Aboriginal site that was destroyed, that is being destroyed for oil. This is happening literally right now. And the effects of all of this stuff happening is still prevalent today. Just because it happened in the last century doesn't mean people aren't still alive. There's people who are still alive that were alive and well thinking back then. And those people have had children who've also had children. They probably have grandchildren that are alive growing up right now. Same with Aboriginal people who have had children and grandchildren that are growing up right now and still living with the effects of the intergenerational trauma. All due to colonisation. There was hundreds of Aboriginal languages that were spoken before colonisers came. Now there is only 13 that are well and thriving. 100 are endangered, they're trying to get them better, but there's only 13 languages that are still actively spoken and alive. Apart from the fact that they've had their culture stolen from them and people have tried to stamp out their culture. They've moved them from their homes, they've given them a sense of loss of community. They've taken away their land. The fact that Australian government still doesn't have a land treaty with our Indigenous peoples. The fact that Aboriginal people are at a higher rate discriminated against. They at a higher rate have difficulties getting access to the healthcare, the education, employment, all the services that they need. This isn't something that can just go away because suddenly Australia decides it isn't racist anymore, which it still is. It is something that needs to be actively changed. We need a new system that works to actively go against racism and discrimination. Because the lack of access to employment services, to education services, it has a trickle-down effect. If one person's father was not allowed to get a job until a certain age, or they weren't allowed to buy property until a certain age, or were denied access to certain things, that's going to directly impact their child and how that child grows up. It has such an impact, and then that family, and then that affects their whole community. Everybody around them is impacted by this. Because it isn't fair and it isn't right that Aboriginal peoples make up 30% of the Australian prisoner population, and yet they only make up 2% of the Australian population. That isn't a right statistic. They're clearly being overly targeted by police. And if you're going to try and give me the crap example that, they just grew up in bad neighborhoods and so they're just going to keep doing bad things as they're growing up, well, why don't you fix the neighborhoods that they're growing up in? By fix, I mean help. Help them. A system doesn't change if you just keep ignoring it. And there is systematic oppression and discrimination against these peoples in their own land. So if you're Australian thinking that these issues don't impact us over here, apart from the fact that over 400 Indigenous peoples have died in police custody in the last 30 years, and there have been no arrests for it. There's been no charges placed against any of those police officers, no investigations done, nothing. So if you're an Australian who thinks and who wants to say, these things don't happen over here in our lovely country, I think you need to open your eyes and again research and educate yourself. Because your absolute ignorance is not helping you. What I'm trying to say is, nobody is disconnected from these issues. As far away as you want to put them, it's going to happen. It's happening in your neighborhood right now. Racial issues don't just not exist when you're not paying attention to them. And unfortunately, people of color worldwide do not just get to turn off their phones and suddenly they're not dealing with them anymore. Unfortunately, they do not just get to take off their skin whenever they feel like it's getting too hard. It is something that they have to live with day in, day out. Just because I've never seen somebody commit an arson or try and murder someone doesn't mean that those sorts of things do not happen. Just because you don't see it and just because nobody you know does it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Racial issues, which are just that, racial issues, they're not political issues, are something that unfortunately still exist. And people need to start having actual conversations about this. It is not just a little social movement that will go away next month after you get bored of posting it on your timeline. It is something that you need to keep talking out about, whether that is on one of your social media platforms, because at this point everybody has an influence over some people. Whether that be online or offline, you need to start having these conversations with people, with your friends, with your siblings, with your parents, with your cousins, extended family. You need to start having conversations with people at your churches, your sporting events, your knitting club. I don't know what people do. All of your hobbies. This isn't something that gets swept under the rug. When you see somebody saying something that is racially insensitive, you need to speak up about it, because smaller microaggressions make it easier and easier to just sweep under the rug the large issues at hand. And with it all being on the news, it has become easier and easier to start a conversation about it. So I encourage you all to have these difficult conversations. It will be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Because no matter what rules governments put into play, that will never change a public's opinion. And we have the power to change all of our people, all of the people who surround us. There are so many people that you can impact, whether it be at school or at work, anywhere you can have an impact on somebody. Because I don't care what you're thinking, like maybe Australia is the least racist place. Being the least racist is still racist, and at this point, silence is not an option. You can't have the option to just not be racist. You need to be actively anti-racist. Because I don't care where you are in the world, if you think that where you live is the least racist place, the least racist is still racist, and you need to learn, we as a society, we as a global community need to learn to be anti-racist. And silence is not an option at this point. Silence is louder than any statement or any racial slur that you can put out, because silence is showing your complicitness. It is showing that you are on the side of the oppressor and that you're okay with what is going on. That being said, I know you might not want to speak out because you don't want to be ill-informed or misinformed. But there's a very easy solution to that, is to educate yourself. There's a lot of books, movies, TV shows out there. Just Mercy is out for free for you to rent on Amazon Prime. Another movie, Selma. A lot of movies you can use to educate yourself on these matters and black issues and black perspectives. There's also listening to podcasts, reading different blogs, hearing people's stories and understanding and empathizing with them. A lot of platforms have made it very easy for you to find a lot of black voices, both in America and Australia. I know if you live in Australia and you have an Australian Spotify account, there's a banner that says listen to Aboriginal people's voices, and it will link you to a bunch of playlists, a bunch of podcasts of Aboriginal voices talking about their own lives. Another thing that you can do to help past educating yourself is signing petitions, going to protests. It took 6 days of protesting and millions of signatures on petitions, hundreds and thousands of emails and calls sent to the Minneapolis Police Department and different federal and state offices for George Floyd's murderers to be charged and arrested, Not let this matter die down. There are so many other people who have been wrongfully killed, incarcerated, and doing your part by bringing awareness and saying to law enforcement and saying to your government that you will not stand by and let these sorts of things happen and just brush them under the rug. Your voice actually says a lot more than you think it does. And then the last thing that you can do is donate to different organizations and communities that actually help those communities and help those voices, whether it be to people's bail funds for going out and protesting, whether that be to getting lawyers for different people who have been and families who are trying to seek justice. It's organizations that work to help and empower young people's lives in their communities, helping them with their education, helping them in extracurricular activities, building them up so that they do not end up in prisons. And that goes for places in Australia as well. They're helping to build communities and to build culture and build a sense of connection between their culture and their life that they may live elsewhere, and also volunteering in these places. Basically what I'm saying is get involved in any way that you can, whether it be petitions, whether it be going to protests, whether it be donating, or whether it just be educating those people that are around you in your immediate circle. But the most important thing is to not stay silent, to not stay complicit, to let your voice be heard and let people know that you are not okay with racism.